All right, everybody. Hey, I've got a special guest with me today because two reasons. Number one, people just don't believe kind of the craziness that insurance companies will put property owners through. And the second reason is because guess what? Halloween is coming up. So this is our scary roofing, scary insurance claim story. So to help us out, I've got with me Taylor Grant from Bellator Claims Resolution. He's the expert. I follow him on LinkedIn. He's got a ton of videos out there, which he calls the denial of the day. And I love these videos. So I've asked Taylor to come on. Taylor, give us just a quick introduction of yourself.
Yeah, hey Tracy, thanks for having me on. My name is Taylor Grant with Bellator Claims Resolution. We're public insurance adjusters, and really all that means to you as the general population public is that we represent policyholders and property owners with insurance claims when insurance companies are being unfair or unreasonable, as we'll talk about.
So the denial of the day videos, where did you come up with that idea?
It was actually a marketing conference that I was at in Florida, and it just came to me because I know when people get denied on insurance claims, they are not happy, right? And so it just kind of came to me as I was going through this process at this marketing conference, and it just struck like lightning. And it was so inspired and inspirational for me that I knew that it was the right thing to do. And so I just started, I got back and I was like, okay, what's the first step? And then I got the first step done. What's the next step? And so it just kind of built on itself. And within, I'd say about 3 weeks from idea to implementation, I started doing the videos in January of 2018. And at the very beginning, just like anything else, right? Nobody cared, nobody knew about it. And now 4.5-ish years later, it has been an amazing thing for my business. And the stories that I tell, as you know, are absurd, hilarious, crazy, sad, angering, all of the above. So that's kind of how it came about.
Well, see, I just even love the title, the denial of the day, right? And so I see them on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and it's like every time I log in, I'm like, oh, where's the denial of the day? All right. I mean, that's the first thing I look for on LinkedIn. They're
That's
so
so
much
awesome.
fun. Well, and plus, I'm just going to plug you a little bit more, right? The thing that I like about them so much is they're so succinct, right? So 3 minutes, maybe,
Yeah.
which is a lesson for me, right? Because I talk and talk and talk and talk, and my videos are so long. But yours are great. I mean, they just fit into the whole LinkedIn medium so well.
I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
They're awesome. All right, so let's jump into this then, right? So
Okay.
we kind of talked a little bit before we started this interview about what the goal is, right? We want to tell some of your most memorable stories about dealing with insurance companies, dealing with adjusters, and just from your side of it. So get, go ahead, give us number one, your number one scary story about uh, claims.
Yes, absolutely. So before I get started in that, I want to talk about what we call the 4Ds, okay? And this is how I look at a denial. It's not necessarily just being denied on your insurance claim, but a few things. One is a delay of a claim, right? So say something that should have taken 30 days is now taking 60 or 90 days. This is what I see as the insurance companies doing that are hindering the ability of the insured to get their property to pre-loss condition. So one is delay the claim. Two is they'll deny the claim. Three is they'll diminish the claim. And I think this is important where say you're owed $50,000 on your insurance claim and they pay you $32,000, right? And the last one is defend, make you go to court to get your money from that. So just kind of throwing that out there because that will kind of give the foundation for how absurd some of these things are, right? So this is my favorite because it continues to come up in different ways across the 8 years that I've been doing public adjusting is the duplex. Okay. Sometimes it was a residential duplex that I started out with, at the beginning of my career. And more recently, it's like a commercial duplex where literally, okay, it's the same building. It is the same roof. It is just separated by this invisible line that somebody made up, right? And insurance company A is like, yeah, you know what? We see some damage. We'll cover your portion of the roof. Insurance company B is like, there's no damage here. There's no hail damage. There's nothing up here. There's no wind damage. Like, we're not going to cover anything.
It's amazing how those storms work, right?
Right. Yeah. It's just like skirted over the invisible magic line, hit this side with hail, but nothing on this side. And so now you have two owners, right? One owner's like, hey, my insurance company, because it's the same roof. You can't, like, you have to coordinate that, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to have one person put on roof A and then not do roof B until 6 or 8 months later, right? So you have to coordinate that. So you have, party A and party B usually kind of at odds, because one is like, hey, my insurance company is willing to pay for my roof, and the other guy's like, hey, I'm not so sure yet, I'm still working with them. So ultimately, in this most recent case, we had asked the adjuster to meet us out there. Hey, no, we've already made our determination, we're not going to do that, we don't think there's any damage up there, so on and so forth, right? And literally on the side that got paid, there's a broken skylight from hail. Like, it is not small hail. If it's breaking skylights, like, it is for sure something of record, right? And so we continue to ask the adjuster, no, we're not going to do that. No, we're not going to do that. And finally, he's like, you know what? I'm not going to meet you out there. I'm going to send our engineer. Great.
Oh, we know how those
has
go,
to say.
right?
Right. So usually, we call them outcome oriented vendors, where usually they are paid for by the insurance company to create a report for the insurance company, who continues to pay them. And usually it's an outcome that the insurance company likes, right? In this case, I met the guy up there. I proved beyond any shadow of a doubt that this is hail damage. Look at all the damage to the vents. Look at all the damage to the shingles, the gutters. There's some to the windows. And, oh, by the way, Mr. Engineer, did you know that the neighbor across this invisible line on this roof that we're sitting on, right, their insurance company paid? And can you see that damage over there? That skylight is broken, right? And so he's like, well, I don't care about that. I'm like, okay, I get that you're not here to assess the other side, but my job as a public insurance adjuster is to show you things that are reasonably relevant to this claim, which that is, because it is the exact same roof. Their insurance company is paying for it. This insurance company is not. Tell me how that's even possible, right? And I'm the kind of guy, if I get up there and I don't see damage, I'm going to let my insured know, hey, there's no damage. We're not going to chase this, even if your neighbor paid for it. But there's obvious damage. It is textbook. And at that point, we had that meeting with the adjuster, the engineer. And the engineer, plays all coy, like, well, yeah, maybe that's damage, maybe it's not, maybe it's hail damage, maybe it's not. It could be foot traffic. And I'm just sitting there going, you think this is foot traffic? Like, what kind of engineer are you if you are truly believing that it's foot traffic? But these guys say a lot of things on the roof, kind of the red herring to get you off track and, things like that. And so I just kind of sit back. I'm pretty laid back when I do my inspections. And as long as they're cool with me, I'm very cool with them. And it was a very good meeting with the engineer. And I just pointed out the damage and I said, look, this is hail damage. You can see it on the chimney chase cover. You can see it on all this other stuff here. Like, this is hail damage. Okay, well, I'll get my report to the adjuster and you guys can deal with it. Okay, great. It took about 3 weeks, but finally the report came back and the roof was magically paid for.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Right. And so why do we have to put the insured, ourselves, the contractors, through all of this stuff to get the insurance company to do what they have been paid to do this whole time?
Yeah, and that what you just said is a really important point from the standpoint, probably like you, I get tons of trolls on my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Telling me that I'm a crook, telling me that I'm lying, telling me that I'm overcharging, blah, 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 blah. So I did a series of 7 videos highlighting examples, just like what you just said, of what the insurance companies have done to homeowners. And in every one of those cases, the insurance companies then magically agree that the roof does need to be replaced and that our cost is correct.
Right.
Is this multi-billion-dollar company that you're dealing with just saying, oh, this guy Taylor, I don't want to argue with him anymore, just give him what he wants?
Right.
Or are they saying, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about, we got caught? You see what I'm saying?
So yeah, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because this wasn't even on my radar until you said that. But I'll just throw this out there because I think it's really relevant. Is insurance companies, all they do is mitigate risk. Okay. They look at you, your claim history, if we're talking about health insurance, your health history, your property history on property insurance, and then they tell us, hey, this is what we're going to charge you based on your risk to us, right? And as long as you're paying your premiums without making a claim, you're an asset. The instant you make a claim, you become a liability, right? And so these insurance companies understand really one thing, and it's risk. Taylor at Bellator Claims is putting us at extreme risk as the insurance company because he's proving his point where if this went to court, the judge would have a hard time believing us as the insurance company versus the proof and evidence Taylor is showing us.
Interesting.
And that's what flips it. So for you as a contractor, for your insureds that are watching this, that's what insurance companies understand is risk. If I can put them at enough risk for them to say, hey, we should probably pay this claim because if we don't, the outcome of not paying the claim and then say them sending us to court, taking us to court, we're going to lose our rear ends, okay? And we should probably pay this claim. So there's a tipping point of when that happens, and you have to do it in a very coordinated way to make sure you're hitting all the steps to get to that point.
All right, scary claim story number 2.
Yes. So this one is crazy as far as what we were able to do. And so this is what we call the diminished payment, okay? So there's a school district in Denver that called us up and said, hey, you know, the initial adjuster told us that our claim was going to be like $3 million. And then they brought up this large loss guy. So they're switching adjusters, which, as you know, they do all the time. And now they're bringing out this large loss guy that's supposed to have more authority and more knowledge. And the large loss adjuster pays $277,000 to the school district.
When the first claim was, or the first adjuster said 3 million.
Yeah, and he was just saying it off the top of his head, right? The first adjuster maybe shouldn't have mentioned that, right? But ultimately what happened was because of that, it kind of set the expectations for the school district. So they called me up, kind of told me what was going on. I said, hey, look, before we even start working together, because this is going to be such a large claim, I for sure know that you're being diminished on your payment for $277,000. And that underpayment could be anywhere between $5 and $10 million, just looking at kind of the things that I'm seeing. So we went and we looked at the properties. I pulled up my hail history reports and said, how many properties does the school district own? And what size hail would damage the type of roofing system? They had PVC. What size of hail would damage the roofing systems that they have? And then we went and looked at all the schools that kind of met the criteria. And we took it from, I think it was basically, it's like 2.5 schools because one school was getting torn down and they only paid the ACV on it. We basically took it from 2.5 schools to 7 schools because the claim was already made. Okay. And there was damage on all these other schools. So we called the insurance company back out and I said, hey, I'm the public adjuster on it. Well, why are they having a public adjuster? We paid that claim fairly. I'm like, you paid $277,000. What we're saying is there's a lot more schools that you haven't even looked at that should be included in this claim because they were all hit with hail on that same date of loss. And you guys haven't looked at these schools. Why not? You were up here, you did a physical inspection with your engineer, and now you guys are saying there's no hail damage. He goes, yeah, that school that you say is that you're saying has hail damage. We looked at it. There's no hail damage there, Taylor. I'm like, okay, would you be willing to come back for another inspection? And this large loss general adjuster is a very good adjuster. I have to give him a lot of credit. Flies out, brings his engineer, and we're on the first school. Then he looks at his engineer, looks at me and goes, hey, I don't know what's happening, but this hail damage wasn't here when we looked at it a few months ago. And I'm like, okay.
Fairies,
I didn't say
magic fairies.
Right. And I didn't say anything, but ultimately I'm always like, so what I say is I'm playing chess while they're playing checkers. Okay. So I'm always that many steps ahead. So before I even got there, I looked back to see when was the most recent storm of snow or hail or rain or anything, right? And really the most recent storm for snow was 3 or 4 months before. And so I'm like, well, there were no storms between the time you looked at it and we came out and looked at it and now we're here together. I didn't say any of that, but that's really what occurred, right? So now you have an adjuster that either truly didn't see the damage while his engineer was present at an inspection before we got involved. And now all of a sudden they're magically seeing something, or they diminished the payment on the school district because they didn't think anybody was going to get involved and get up on there, because the guys that do maintenance on schools, right, and the roofs and stuff, they're just up there fixing holes and stuff like that. They're not like, hey, you have an insurance claim, you need to get this inspected, right? And so I just think the insurance company was like, well, I think we could probably pay him 300 grand, $277,000, and everything will be fine.
Throw him a bone.
So if you can believe this, we took that claim from $277,000 to $7.8 million.
Oh, Taylor, you're just an ambulance chaser.
If getting the insured what they are rightfully owed based on the policy they have after a storm to make them to pre-loss condition, if that makes you an ambulance chaser, I guess I am, right?
So do you hear that? Do you hear that from haters?
I don't really, but storm chasers, sure. But ultimately the thing is, like, people will say whatever they want, but okay, if actually helping the person that's getting taken advantage of get what they're rightfully owed makes me an ambulance chaser, I guess that's what it makes me. Doing the right thing. Okay.
That's a great story. All right. Scary story number 3. Do you have one?
I do. And this is an interesting one. I've never told this story in public, like this public domain. Okay. This actually happened on my own house in the 2019 storm. Okay. And there was 1.5-inch hail. It broke 2 of my windows. Okay. So this is how intense the storm was. Okay. I have an insurance company who and they basically said, hey, we're going to pay like $22,000 for the damage to your roof. Blew up the whole roof. Like, the roof is just smashed. All the vents are damaged. Like, this is obvious hail damage, right? And 2 windows are broken. And it actually punctured one of the shingles to the point where water came in and damaged the interior of one of my rooms. Okay. So they're like 22,000 is what we're going to pay you. And I'm like, that can barely put on the roof. At this point, they have no idea I'm a public insurance adjuster, right? They have no idea. And I'm just going through the process step by step, hearing everything that my clients tell me. Well, they told me they wouldn't do that because that's just their policy. That's their internal guidelines. We just don't do that, Taylor. I'm like, oh, really? I'm like, okay, could you show me the policy where it says that? Because I am the insured, and also PS, I'm a public insurance adjuster. This is what I do for a living. So it was kind of fun. It was kind of funny, right? It was also very angering and very frustrating because I'm going through this process that my clients tell me all the time, like, hey, we've been paying our premiums. And literally I had lived in that property up to that point almost 15 years, never made a single claim ever. Right. And so at this point now, legitimate damage, legitimate claim to be made. Ultimately, long story short, we got the diminished claim from 22 up to $53,000. Okay. By just doing the things that I do every day and just asking them to show me, okay, where in your policy does it say that? Well, it's our internal guidelines. Okay. When I signed up to buy this policy, was I agreeing to your internal guidelines that I didn't get to see? Well, no. Okay. So why is that affecting my ability to get fully made whole or indemnified, right? As good or better than before the loss, depending on what the policy says? How is that like fair to me? And so I had to go through a bunch of channels. They changed probably 4 or 5. I think it was actually 4 adjusters on me, which is their favorite game. Like, oh, I didn't know. I'm going to change it off to this adjuster, right? And so I went through this whole situation, right? Just like all my clients go through. And it was such an amazing experience. Like, I couldn't even be mad about it, right? Because I mean, ultimately I got what I needed. But I also learned everything they do to an owner from start of the claim to the end of the claim, where I usually don't get involved at the very beginning of the claim. I'm usually a third of the way through, 2/3 of the way through, then I'm getting involved. But just being able to call in the claim and feel and experience that whole thing all the way through was an incredible experience.
I mean, you've given me a lot of food for thought, what I would call ammunition for using a PA, public adjuster.
Yeah.
What would you tell somebody? Why should a homeowner, just a residential homeowner, use a public adjuster or consider using a public adjuster as opposed to letting a roofer do this stuff?
Right. Yeah, and some roofers are very capable and can really do a good job. The thing is, they are not licensed to adjust claims. Okay. So there's three things really that roofers should be doing and speaking about with the adjuster: scope of work, pricing, and method of repairs. Well, that's their expertise. My expertise are really like, what is in your policy coverage, and how can we use your policy in your best interest, Mr. or Mrs. Insured, to get the insurance company to pay what they rightfully are supposed to pay based on what your policy says. So my power as a public insurance adjuster is really 95% of it is in the policy. The policy dictates the contract. Okay. So it's a contract. They call it a policy because people don't like the word contract, but it is a contract between the insured and the insurer. And my power and my expertise lie in the ability to look at that policy contract, make coverage determinations that are based on my opinion and interpretation, and then get the insurance company to do their job based on that policy. So as far as getting a public insurance adjuster involved, if your contractor with scope of work, pricing, and method of repair can get your claim fully and fairly paid to make you as good or better than before the loss, you really don't need me. The issue becomes when it is a coverage issue. Okay. And the coverage issues become, well, we're not going to pay this because we don't owe that. We don't owe overhead and profit. We just don't do that. It's not complex enough. There aren't enough trades. Okay. What I say is to the adjuster, okay, show me in the policy where it says it has to be complex enough, and show me the level and the scale of complexity that is required for you to pay overhead and profit.
Yeah, see, that's actually a really important question, right? Because in probably the letter of the law, SB 38, the roofer can't ask that question.
Right.
So that's a very important point, because these roofers that say they're insurance claim specialists, they're not insurance claim specialists. They're roofing specialists.
Right.
They can't really say they're insurance claim specialists because they can't ask those kinds of questions.
Exactly. And if they are, then they're breaking the law, right? Because they're doing what's called the unauthorized practice of public adjusting. And so it's a very fine line. And I get that, right? And ultimately, it's one of those things that I always say, I'd rather guide the ship than try to raise a sinking ship. Because by the time I get involved, the ship is usually starting to sink or has completely sunk, right?
Yeah.
So at that point, I have to do more due diligence to try to get it up off the sea floor and get it back to afloat and shipping, or being sent in the right direction, right? Cruising in the right direction. So ultimately, what I like to say is, if it's a coverage issue, you need a public adjuster, and you need them sooner than later, because usually what happens is people will try to fight the claim. Even contractors will try to fight a claim an extra 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks. And now you just burned a month to 2 months that if I would have gotten involved then, less of trying to save a sinking ship and then guiding it in the right direction to getting it fully paid. So.
Well, in this video, right, the goal was to talk about these scary stories, these insurance claim stories from your side of it, and just gain your expertise and your experience. My point was not to make a commercial for Bellator, but I think this really worked out to be a good case in point of why people should consider a public adjuster, especially why roofers should consider backing away from that side of things.
Yeah.
Letting somebody like yourself do something like that. So how can people get a hold of you if they want to do that?
Yeah, great question. Let me just make one point to your point is, I wish a lot of contractors would put pen to paper and look at the cost benefit analysis of how much time they waste working on a claim versus just getting a public adjuster involved. Yeah. Because if you're burning 2 months on a claim, like, what else could you have been doing in that time?
Yeah.
Right. If you can hand off a claim to a public adjuster and let the public adjuster do what they're really good at, and usually can get better results than most contractors can, right? Like, why are you wasting your time? But to your question, bellatorclaims.com. So it's BELLATOR claims.com. You can see in the background here. But ultimately, that is the best way to reach us, and the best way to see some of the more recent videos of the work that we've done and some of the case studies that we've gotten accomplished for our insureds.
Now, if people want to see your denial of the day videos, is it best to follow you on LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook? How do they see those?
So we post them all three of those places. So for me, I like watching them on Facebook because I'm on Facebook more than anything else. But LinkedIn, as far as like if it's a business connection, absolutely. You know, I've heard multiple people say that when they hop on, the denial of the day is at the top of their feed, right? So I think LinkedIn's a great spot. That's how you and I met, which is awesome. And but yeah, any of the socials we're usually on. I like Facebook because I'm just on there more.
Cool. Well, we've I don't know if they've ever followed up on it, but we've sent several homeowners your way when it's just we know that it's beyond our scope of expertise. So
Yeah, I appreciate that.
yeah,
Thank
well,
you.
thanks so much for joining us. I sure appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. I'd love to be on again if the need ever arises.
Oh yeah, let's do that. We'll plan for that. All
Appreciate
right.
it.
So hey everybody, you watched the whole video. Thank you for that. I really think that you're gonna like this video right here. So give this one a click. Until our next video, I'm Tracy Bookman, owner of Homestead Roofing.